Welcome back to the Dazed and Confused in the Dating Pool and Why It Doesn't Have to Be That Way podcast. I am your co host, Rachel. This is my amazing co host, Mickler. And today we're talking about what do you do when things seem still? The reality of dating, at least in my experience, and I know Mickler's as well, is it can feel like, oh my gosh, everything's exciting and this is happening. And either you're talking to like a bunch of people are interested in you, or you're talking to somebody that you see really strong potential in. And then it seems like things go quiet. What do you do then? Or maybe you've had some of those and then you're on the apps and you're not finding anybody, or just whatever. There's just these seasons. I don't know, but I feel like for me, it either goes from like, oh, this is all exciting and this is all happening to like crickets, right? So, first of all, we want to talk about the fact that that is completely normal. And secondly, what do you do when everything seems to go still?
Yeah, and I know you're saying, "Oh, it's just you," but no, definitely for me, and I think a lot of us, on this dating journey. But yeah, like Rachel and I, we're not dating experts. We're not like counselors or anything. We're just two kingdom believers on a journey to find the one that the Lord has for us. So we're just gonna share real and raw our experience and the things that we're currently going through, because yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now. It seems like, and I know a lot of guys talk about and they use a certain language, like, "Hey, man, you're going through a dry spell right now," and for me, it's like, "Hey, is that even kingdom? Like, you talk about spells, yo. Like, that's weird."
Oh, you're talking about spells. Don't be getting all Harry Potter up in
Okay,
here.
okay, yeah.
I'm just messing with you.
but it, but it seems like things are like moving and shaking. Like for me, it's like if one girl reaches out, they're all kind of reaching out, and there's like multiple, and then it's like, oh wow, I have options, and I like which girl do I like, type of thing. And then it can switch where it's like crickets, like Rachel said, like no one's hitting me up, there's no conversations going and stuff like that, no matches on the apps, and it's just like, dang, like what do I do now? Like, so, um, yeah, the struggle is real, and yeah, just wondering, I guess, what should one do in this time?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting. You're talking about your harem. No, I'm teasing. Totally
Wait,
teasing
wait,
you.
wait, wait. Say that again. Say that again.
It's like you're talking about your harem of like all of these girls interested in you at once. I'm just messing with you. Oh my gosh. Um, and for me, because I operate a little differently, so when I meet somebody that I see strong potential in, I'm not looking for quantity, I'm looking for quality. And so I'll match with somebody, whether you meet them in person or online or however in community. And it's like, oh, there could really be potential here. And then we hit it off and we have a conversation and you're like, wow, this could really go somewhere. And then for whatever reason, it goes quiet. And you're like, okay, I thought this was happening. Like what? And so I think the biggest thing, first of all, just to be honest about, is that this happens. Like, welcome to dating. Dating in 2023 101. Like, and I think it's kind of like life too. Like, life isn't all thrilling experiences all the time. There's also the like, hey, you get up and you get dressed and you do whatever you're doing in the day and you come home and you make dinner and you brush your teeth and you go to bed, right? Like it's just part of life. It's part of the day to day. And just because things are quiet doesn't mean something is wrong. And I want to start by giving you that piece of hope today that just because things are quiet doesn't mean that things are wrong. Just because things seem still doesn't mean that things are wrong. They might not even necessarily be wrong with that person that you're connecting with, right? Like, who knows what's going on in their world, in their life? Like, I'll just be honest, this week I had an insane week and I just was going nonstop. It felt like from morning to night. And I mean, there were days that I felt like I was just kind of catching my breath. So, as much as, on the one hand, it's more exciting when things are exciting. Like, for things to be still this week was actually kind of helpful because, as much as I would have enjoyed that, I didn't really have a ton of bandwidth for it. And so I think that we have to remember, you can always put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So again, whether it's somebody you're talking to, somebody you met, whatever, like you message somebody on an app and they didn't respond, like just keep in mind you don't know what's going on in their life. And it could have nothing to do with their interest in you. It could have everything to do with something going on that you don't even know about. So I just want to put that out there. And also, again, just to say that, like, it's totally normal. It's totally normal. Nothing in life is like crazy excitement 100% of the time. I think that when it comes to dating, because when it is exciting, we get the emotions and we get the butterflies and we get the, endorphins going and all that kind of stuff, which is all wonderful and fun and part of the process. But just because it's not happening doesn't mean A, there's anything wrong with you. B, there's anything wrong with the opposite sex. C, there's anything wrong with your dating life. It means that you're normal. Congratulations, right? Like, it's totally okay. And, I was having a conversation with my friend Olivia the other night, and she said something that I really took as gold. And she was like, Rach, when things are still, that's when we can catch our breath and remember who we are again. And I was like, dang, that's so good. And so, could it be that this pause that you're experiencing is actually a gift? Again, when it comes to dating, because there are emotions involved, I know, especially I can speak as a woman, when there's all of these ebbs and flows and highs and lows, it can get exhausting. It can get so draining. And sometimes what we need, and we don't even realize we need, is a pause. Because, I hear a lot of people talk about dating and working the apps like they're working a job. And I'm sorry, that sounds miserable to me. Like, if you're working it like you're working a job, you're probably, and you have that mindset, like the way you show up in those dates, is that going to be fully who you are? Are you going to be having fun? Or is it like, all right, let's interview this person. All right, let's cross them off a little. Like, that doesn't, again, you do you. I'm not judging. We're not dating experts. We're not pretending to be. I'm just saying, from my own personal experience, that sounds miserable. So rather than what, go ahead. You want to dive in on that? Go for it.
Yeah. So, okay. First of all, I don't want to come across as like I'm a player or anything. All right. There's like plethora of women. But I guess I'm just saying,
I did
like,
not mean to paint you in that light at all. I am sorry if I did. That was not my intention. You're just fun to
I
tease.
was like,
That's all.
no. Shooting myself in the foot. No, just kidding. But no, like going off of what you're mentioning with that mindset, like I've been exploring that kind of idea where someone said, like, hey, if you're a business owner and you're in sales, like look at dating like sales. Like it's a numbers game, in order to find the one, you're gonna have to like go through these, ones that you come across, and then maybe you'll learn like what you don't like, what you do like, and then all that stuff. So I started treating it as if it was
like sales.
Yeah. So that's where the numbers came in.
Well, again, we're not dating experts. We don't
Yeah,
pretend to be. I know there's a lot of wisdom out there about that. For me, that's not how I roll.
mm,
That's not really how I roll with sales for my business either, because I'm not called to serve everybody.
yeah,
And
that's
so
good.
the way I look at it is, if I have something that you need, right? And God connects us and we have a conversation and we both feel like it's a good fit, let's move forward. But I'm not interested in talking to 100 people to find out whether or not
Mm,
you're a good fit.
no, that's a
And
good point. That's a
and I
good
know
point.
some people approach dating that way. And if you do, again, you do you. I'm not telling you how to date. We are not here telling you how to date. We're just here being honest about our journeys, right? So, I mean, if that's what you do, but for me, as soon as I put it into the context of a numbers game, I've taken the faces away. And so it's
Mm.
like, oh, am I just concerned about talking to this number? Or am I genuinely getting to know this individual in front of me right now?
Yeah, no, that's a good thing that you bring up, and a good distinction, because I think, like, for example, we can get so caught up in how many matches we get on an app, where it's like we're disconnecting, like, hey, I got one match, and like let me see what's good with this relationship.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important to like foster that. I guess it's it's also like this balancing act too, because like, what if you do match with this person, you send the message, and then you don't get anything back, and it's like, okay, then I might as well go to the next, like.
Which is okay, but like I have experiences where I've matched with somebody, again, online or off. We're not just talking about apps. So I've matched with somebody in the context of community, and then like thought they were interested, didn't hear anything, and then 3 weeks later was like, hey, how soon can we get on a video call? And I was like, oh, okay, this is happening. And then also on the apps, like we talked about, the story from episode 4, like I matched with that guy on 3 different apps and then never heard anything from him until one night he started blowing me up on Facebook Dating, of all things, which was my least favorite platform. And I kind of forgot I was even still on there. So like, but he hadn't really been active on any of those apps. So you just don't know. Like, I think sometimes I think we have to be careful not to assume, right? There's that whole, I'm just going to say it, the whole adage not to assume because we make an ass out of you and me, but it's just true. Like when we assume, oh, this person is not talking to me, they're rejecting me, you don't know if that's actually what's going on. Now, I would say don't chase, right? Like that's kind of my thing, is don't chase. Like in both of those situations, I didn't chase either of those guys. They just ended up coming back around on their own. There are things like ghosting and whatever. And if somebody ghosts you, yeah, absolutely move on. And even in those cases, you could still move on, right? But I just think that, again, it comes down to like, you don't know what's going on in somebody else's life. And like, you could automatically assume this person is not interested when actually they are. So they just have stuff going on in their life, or they're just a slow mover, or, everybody is different. Everybody approaches dating differently. Maybe you're long distance and they're kind of processing, okay, how do I feel about that? And if I reach out, like this could be a thing. And is that something I want to do? So these are all, you don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what's going on in their head. You don't know what's going on in their heart. You don't know what they might be healing from. Like there's so many different dynamics. And I think that here's the thing. Okay. So a friend of mine said this to me a couple of years ago. And she was talking about rejecting rejection. And when rejection comes to us, right? Because rejection is a spirit. So when rejection comes to us, it looks to reject. So what do we do when we feel rejected? We automatically start rejecting others. And you can see this even in people who've been through trauma, and I've experienced it even in kids, the whole rejecting you before I can be rejected. And so when there is a history of rejection on any level in our lives, what we can sometimes do without realizing it is reject, like to protect ourselves. It's a self-protective mechanism before we can be rejected. But what that really is that is a spiritual dynamic that comes from a open door through a wound that we experienced. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's true. And so if you look at how you feel in your heart and the things you find yourself saying when you've been in a rejection situation, that will tell you whether or not that's going on. So we were having this conversation and she was telling me about something she had been through. She said, yeah, I decided to reject rejection. And I was like, ooh, tell me more. She was like, yeah, because I knew that in this situation, even though I had every right to feel rejected and be like, all right, well, this person like did me wrong, blah, blah, blah. She said, I knew in that moment that I had a choice not to give rejection anywhere to land. And I was like, dang, that's good. And she said, so I decided I was not going to give rejection anywhere to land in me. And I powerfully chose in that moment not to reject and to just not let rejection have any hold in me. And I was like, dang, that's so good. And she was like, yeah, I could be bitter about the situation. I could be like, yeah, I should have had that. I should have whatever. And she was like, where would have that gotten me? It would have only fueled that spirit of rejection moving further. And then through me. And I don't want that. And so she said, I reject you, rejection. And she was like, this doesn't determine my worth. And I forgive this person. And she moved on. And I was like, that's so good. So I think when it comes to feeling like, what the hey, with some of these dating situations, we have a choice to reject rejection. It's not saying that rejection doesn't happen. I'm not pretending that. And that's not saying that maybe that person genuinely isn't interested, because that's a real thing too. But we get to choose, like, our emotions are not anybody else's responsibility but ours. And I get to choose in that moment what I do with my emotions. So, am I going to automatically assume that this person is rejecting me? Because if I am, then am I actually rejecting this person before I can be rejected? Am I pushing them away so I feel like I'm protecting myself so they can't hurt me? Or am I going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, you know what, I don't know what's happening in this situation, but I'm just going to extend grace and I'm going to keep living my life. And if they come back around, like, great. And if not, that's all right. And I think that's kind of the main point that we want to get to today is like, what do you do in the pause? Well, life keeps going. I know, like you said, for you, Mickler, you've been focusing in on your business. For me, I've been focusing in on training for this amazing gig that God dropped in my lap, the side gig of training as a fitness coach at a local women's gym, which is incredible. I didn't see it coming, and God just dropped it in my lap. And yeah, it's been intense, but it's been amazing. And I could be like, oh, well, nothing's happening on the dating front. I'm so depressed. Or I could focus on what's in front of me right now. And I think that's the choice that we have at any point in life, no matter whether it's dating or anything else that we are waiting for, right? Like, are you going to sit there and stew and focus on what's not? Or are you going to focus on what is and what God's put in your hand right now? Go ahead, Mickler.
Mm,
What do you want to add to any of
dang,
that?
girl, you got the fuego today.
Gracias.
Yes. No, so I think for me, I'm the opposite. So I've heard stories of people who are like, "Oh, I feel like we're gonna break up, so I'm gonna break up with them first," type of thing.
Mm.
So that they're being proactive with the rejection. Like, I'm gonna reject you first because I don't want to get rejected. For me, I think it's been like the experience of like, what have I done when I've gotten rejected? Because I'm not
Mm.
the one who's rejecting, the other person. And for me, it was like, yeah, it ended up being like, I'm just gonna eat this tub of ice cream, or I'm gonna treat myself out to like, this meal.
Yeah.
And I think some of us guys
I
will,
have eaten a whole bag of chips in one sitting, and I don't really eat chips. So, there's
yeah,
that. I hear you.
we just have these different coping mechanisms. And I think some guys will go out and just try to find another girl. So then that's where that kind of like numbers game kind of like, pops into, or it was like,
So is
oh,
that a relationship or a rebound?
yeah, that's right. I think it's a rebound for sure. But oh man, I don't know if this is a rabbit hole or something, but it's
It's a
like,
rabbit hole,
yeah,
but go down.
yeah, okay.
Go
Yeah,
down, and we're there now.
so I think as guys, we're growing up, and it's like the picture of like being masculine or a man. It's like, hey, don't cry, don't show your emotions. And it's like we're going through these things where, like, as you mentioned, Rachel, so like we may be experiencing the rejection, and it's like, okay, I can't show it. Like, I can't be crying about this. I can't be, doing anything with this. So it starts to come out in our behaviors. And like, again, like we're going after that other girl, or we're turning to food to cope, or, like whatever, websites, pornography, like all these other things, like we're turning to these other things to kind of get like release the pressure or feel better about our situation, when in reality, like, hey, like God is probably calling us to pause, so let me check my heart with him. And I think David is a really good example of this. Like, um he was so real with God, like telling him his struggle. And I think for me, like, I never was like that type of person. I thought God wanted me to be like this perfect person, where it was like, oh, even though I'm experiencing all this, God, like, it's okay. Like, I know you got my back, and I know that I have hope in you, which is true. But I think God is like, he's okay if I was like, you know what, God, I really don't think you're gonna pull through. Like, I really don't have faith right now. I This one relationship that I have was amazing. Like, how am I going to recover and find even a better person after this? Like I think God is like, hey, like he's all for that type of conversation. And us
100%.
guys, yeah, us guys, because we grew up like not being told not to show our emotion, we kind of just hold it in and we just don't express that with,
Mm-hmm.
outwardly type of thing. So,
The thing that I love, I mean, there's so many things that I love about God, but the thing that I love about God is that, first of all, I think sometimes we forget He gave us emotions
mm-hmm.
and we're made in His image, and emotions are part of it. So if you think that God's not emotional, please explain to me the verse that says Jesus wept, right?
No, and even in that section, it was like he got angry right before that, he wept, and then after that he did some action stuff where he was like, hey, I'm gonna bring this person up to life, so it's like
yeah.
even in that situation it was like a multitude of emotions were like were
Well,
being experienced.
and He already knew that Lazarus was going to be raised,
Mm-hmm.
and He still wept.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, I think one thing we have to be careful of is whether we're frustrated, whether we're discouraged, whether we're disappointed, whether we felt rejected, again, either because things are quiet or because there has been a rejection on some level or whatever. I think the first thing is to be real about our emotions and remember that that's not wrong. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I could go off on a rabbit hole, but I won't. But
Let's go.
well, I read something the other day that were like, emotions are the foothold to the enemy, and I was like, oh no, 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 hot garbage. Like, no,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
God gave us these emotions. Now, I will say, what we do with our emotions is a choice.
100%.
And getting stuck in emotions, can that be a foothold for the enemy? 100%. Like,
Yes.
I have spiraled down that more times than I care to talk about, and thankfully, like, now the spirals are shorter because I've healed and because I'm learning and growing and all that stuff. At the same time, emotions are real and we are made in the image of God. God didn't put something in us and be like, oops, I forgot that was there. No, He made us in His image, and part of what we carry is His emotions. And so I think that we have to be real about that. I mean, if you want an example, I love that you brought up David. Like, just read the Psalms. It's in the Bible. Like, David is usually like, literally, like, what the hey, God? Like, I thought you said this, and I thought you said this, and I'm going to die right now. And it's in the Bible, right? Like, God is not afraid of our raw, real emotions, and it never changes our relationship with Him, which I love. And, we were talking about this a little bit last week, but, and I think I mentioned this, but my friends, Bo and Shanna, they're an amazing married couple, and they do quite a bit of ministry with marriages. And one of the things that I heard Bo say one time, and I was like, dang, that's so good, is that conflict invites connection. Do you know the same can be true in our relationship with the Lord? When we are real and we're like, God, I don't get this. God, I am hurting right now. God, I'm angry right now. God, I'm sad about this right now. What does it do? It invites us into a deeper level of relationship with Him in that area of our lives. It's not pushing Him away. It's actually saying, like, because vulnerability is, here I am, the raw, the real, the ugly, the good, the bad, everything. Like, this is the fullness of who I am. And vulnerability is a key pillar of intimacy. So when we're that vulnerable with God, it's not that He doesn't know, but sometimes we need to express it for ourselves. So when we're that vulnerable with God, of like, hey, I am not okay with this right now. Like, I don't understand what's happening in my life. God, I am tired. I'm tired of this. Like, feels like there's no good guys out there. Feels like there's no good girls out there. I'm like, I thought you said, I'm disappointed. I'm discouraged. I'm hurting. I'm whatever. Like, it's not like He didn't know anyway. But when we vocalize it, we invite Him into that place. Now, where we have to be careful is when we throw a pity party and we get stuck there and we get mad at Him and we're like, nope, I got this, thanks, or like, screw you, or, any of the things that we say. Like, that's where we have to be careful that we don't get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
But releasing the emotions and being honest about the emotions, I believe, invites a deeper level of intimacy, even with the Lord. What would you say to that?
No, 100%. I just wanted to like piggyback off the idea like of like how does one not get stuck in that place, you
Mm.
know? And I think it's important to have people around you in your corner to also be raw and vulnerable with this too. Like you take it up with God, you could pray about it, get, you know, and get something from his word, you know, which is amazing. Like those revelations there's like will change your life. But sometimes you may not hear from the Lord, you know, and it might be
Well,
very hard. Like
yeah, well, I was going to say, I think then the other thing is releasing it. Because if we're
mm,
calling it an emotional release, that means you let go.
mm,
And so for me, what I have learned, I have these little thoughtful spots outside because that's where I love, 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 love to just have these moments of connection with the Lord. And there's a lake near me where I love to just go and sit with the Lord. And I will just have it out and I'll just be raw and real. And then I'll say, okay, now that I've said all this, I release this to you and I let it go into your hands and I trust you. And I exchange all of these emotions for your peace. For me, that's how I choose to not get stuck. And then I think the other thing is recognizing too, like, okay, are these real emotions caused by, well, let me say that again because emotions are real. So, and they're like symptoms, right? So if you start to get a runny nose or you have a sore throat, that's an indicator that something in your body is wrong. So if you start to feel discouraged, annoyed, whatever, that's an indicator that something is wrong. So then the next thing I like to do is say, okay, so what is causing these? Is this a real situation or is this my perception of the situation? Is this a trigger from maybe a past experience? Like, where are these emotions coming from? And then I can go into that with the Lord, like, oh, okay, well, I assumed, again, I'm just going to use this example because it happened very recently. I assumed that this person was rejecting me when actually the opposite was the case. And I assumed this based on a previous experience. So, Lord, I'm sorry. Would you just continue to root and ground my heart in your love and that I am unconditionally loved and chosen and accepted by you and that my value doesn't come from anyone else so that when this situation comes up again, I don't want to choose to rejection, like choose to jump to a rejection thought first, but I would know that my value isn't dictated by this situation. So again, that's going deeper into it, but I think it starts by the release and then the release. And then we can say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to know about the situation? What do you want me to know about what's going on in my heart? And have that honest conversation with the Lord too. What would you add to that, Mickler?
yeah, no, for sure. For sure. um I guess it can get hard sometimes, like because we can get stuck if we don't know what we don't know, in a sense.
Well, that's where trust comes in.
Mm. Mm.
That's where trust comes in. And honestly, I'll just be transparent. That's something God and I are really working on right now is rebuilding trust. Because trust involves, like, if you've ever done a trust fall, you literally throw your body backwards in the anticipation that somebody's going to catch you. And so when I was going to say when I was little, I'm still little, but when I was in elementary school, I was one of the smallest ones. And so at recess or gym or whatever, they'd love to do trust falls with me. And at first I was like, okay. But then they started dropping me and it became like a joke.
Bro.
And then when they asked, like, hey, let's do a trust fall, I was like, heck no. Find somebody else to mess with. Like, you're not smashing my head on the floor again. And so that's true in life as well. But we can choose to rebuild trust. And I think the thing we have to remember is that no matter what we've experienced, God is so much better. He's a good, kind, loving Heavenly Father who is even better than we know, even better than we could ask, think, or imagine. And it's not a matter of trusting people, although that's part of it, as much as it's a matter of trusting Him. And in dating, trusting Him with our hearts is very real. So The other day I was reading in Proverbs 3, and I'm a huge Bible nerd. I think I've talked about that already on the podcast, but in case I haven't, I'm a huge Bible nerd. And I love to dig into the original meanings of the words. And then Holy Spirit and I go on a treasure hunt together. And one of my favorite that I have ever done is something that God's been bringing to mind over and over and over. And it's just so relevant for where I am. And I'm just going to quote it to you because I have it memorized. I've read it so much. Actively confide in and set your hope in the direction of trust fall towards Jehovah. Persuade the totality of your soul to fear nothing for itself and to be at rest. Don't recline upon or support yourself only on what you understand, but be intimately acquainted with him the whole journey, and your path will be smooth, right, successful. And that whole like, persuade the totality of your soul to fear nothing for itself and to be at rest. Because any time that my soul is disrupted, anytime that I have an inability to trust or a hard time trusting, what is that rooted in? Fear. So for me in elementary school, it was rooted in, hey, I don't really like the feeling of my head slamming the floor and you guys laughing. That's not fun for me. You know, as an adult, it's like, hey, I don't really like the feeling of you said something and then your actions don't follow through. Like, that doesn't feel good to me, you know, or like fill in the blank. So when it comes to God, anywhere that I struggle to trust him means that there's some level of fear, which is rooted in a belief that either he's not going to be there, he's not going to come through, he's not going to deliver on what he said, right? Like that's where that comes from. And so, again, that's where this prayer that I've started to pray, because perfect love casts out fear. So wherever there's fear, there's just not a full saturation of his perfect love. And so when I'm finding these fears recently come up, and it's not just about dating, right? It can be about all kinds of areas of our lives. When I'm finding these, like, is this going to be okay? Like, I don't know. Like you were talking about, Mickler, the unknown. Like, I love adventure. Oh, I love adventure. And the unknown is thrilling, right? Like when I hike a mountain and I come around a corner and there's this view that I didn't know was there, it's like, oh, this is amazing. This is the best day of my life, right? But yet when I am going through everyday life and my lease is up for renewal, and what am I going to do, God? Where am I going next? Da, da, da. And like there's all this unknown, all of a sudden it's terrifying. And so, you know, one of the things that God reminds me of, like, hey, honey, I built you for adventure, remember? You love this. And I was like, yeah, but I like it better when we're like exploring in nature than when we're like living life, you know? And the thing is, it's no different. Like when I am on a hike and I am expecting to see beauty, like a lot of times I am counting on the reviews on All Trails or the group that I'm hiking with, or the fact that, you know, where I'm hiking is a beautiful location, whatever it is, like there's some kind of anticipation that this is going to be good. And then I experience it. So why is it in my life that when there's unknown, there's this anticipation of, oh, this is going to be bad? What is that rooted in? Fear, fear of disappointment, fear of all kinds of things. And again, wherever fear is, there is not perfect love, because perfect love casts out fear. So as God and I have been working to rebuild trust in my own personal life, again, getting very vulnerable with y'all about where I'm at on my journey, whether it's with men, because that's an area right now that we're working to rebuild in trust, or trust with God. It's this idea of, okay, Lord, where this is coming up in my heart, where there's this fear, I invite your perfect love. Like root and ground me in your perfect love there, so that every feeling of insecurity, every trace of performance, I have to measure up, I have to earn this, you know, like we were talking about last week, every feeling of like, I don't know how this is going to come out and I'm a little scared. Wherever there's any trace of fear, root and ground me in your perfect love there, and let your perfect love, because that word perfect also means mature. It means complete. It means lacking nothing. So let your complete, mature love, lacking nothing, root and ground me there, so that fear has no hold in my life, because I powerfully choose to trust you. And I want to say that too, that like trust is a choice. And sometimes it literally comes down to saying, God, I choose to trust you. I don't understand what's happening right now, but I choose to trust you. Whether it was, 10 years ago when I was facing surgery and not sure how much life I had left to live. God, I don't understand these circumstances, but I trust you. Whether it's, something going on in my business, God, I don't understand, but I choose to trust you. Whether it's something going on in dating, God, I don't understand, but I choose to trust you. Like in every moment, we have the ability and we are powerful to choose what we're going to partner with. So, am I going to partner with fear or am I going to partner with trust? Because the trust isn't that I have it all figured out. The trust is that I know whom I've believed and I'm persuaded that you're faithful. So the trust is not, I know exactly how this is going to pan out. The trust is, I know you and I know your character, and I powerfully choose to partner my trust there.
Sheesh.
I was like, let me shut up and let Mickler get a word in edgewise.
Oh man, I don't know where to go with that. That's like so good and so important. Like, so yeah, like when we're in this season of like, hey, it's a pause. Be open, vulnerable with God, releasing the emotions, processing with Him, but also learning to trust Him. Like, hey, He's taking care of this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Can I share my testimony now?
Yeah.
All right. So this is just so cool to me, y'all. So I mentioned my new job as a fitness coach at a local women's gym. And honestly, you guys, like it was a total God thing that I felt like he just dropped in my lap out of the blue. Like I was going to a networking meeting for my personal branding business back in May, and I met this gym owner and we hit it off. And she needed somebody to teach a bar class for her the next night. She was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. My coach had an emergency. And I was like, what if I just do it? And she was like, that would be amazing. What would you do? And I walked her through and she was like, okay, here's the code to get into the building. I was like, is this happening right now? Like, I'm literally at a networking meeting, leaving with a bar gig for tomorrow night. Like, what? So I taught for her and then I taught again in June. And then she was like, hey, let's go to coffee. And I didn't know, like, is this just an entrepreneur, like, hey, let's get to know each other kind of thing? So I went to coffee, not really knowing what to expect. And we shared each other's, journeys and stories and whatever. And then she offered me this coaching position. She was like, yeah, you're really good at bar, but if you'd like to, like, I'd love to teach you, personal training and hit and Tabata and weights and like all the stuff that we do here and overseeing clients. And I was like, wow, that would be amazing. Like, that's not stuff that I've ever trained on before. And I just really felt the peace of the Lord on it. And I said yes. And so I started training. And like I said, it's been very intense. I've also loved it. And it felt to me like so out of the blue. Oh, let me say this too, because I feel like I'm supposed to share it. So originally, I had my own plans for July. I was going on this epic road trip. Like I have had this planned like in my head, not like specific details because I'm a visionary, but shout out to Mickler, who is the detail person. But like I just knew that in the month of July, I was going to be on the road for the whole month. I was going to go see friends I haven't seen in like 20 years. I was super excited about it. I was going to hike. I was going to do all these things and like go across the country. It was going to be amazing. I was so excited. And towards the end of June, I felt God asking me to let it go. And I was like, no, like I thought like you and I planned this together, because where it came from was back in December. I promise this all ties in. Where it came from was back in December, where he invited me to dream with him. And I had this like picture instantly of like going on this road trip. And I was like, yeah, that would be amazing. And so that had kind of been like in my mind since then. And so I was like, but God, you and I dreamed this up together and this was going to be awesome. And you're asking me to let it go. And I don't understand. And I was really sad, but I did. And I was like, okay, Lord, what do you have for me in July? And then ding, this literally dropped in my lap like days before the 4th of July. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then, the more that I was there and the more I got to know these ladies who are amazing, like we have all different backgrounds and ages and everything. Like there are ladies in their 70s who can rock out burpees like you would not believe. It's amazing. And so, Like, anyway, just getting to be part of this community and things that God was doing in me and healing in me and whatever. But again, in my mind, this was like out of the blue. So this just happened yesterday. So I was at the studio yesterday morning from 6 a.m. to noon. Not my favorite, but from 6 a.m. to noon. And I was, to be honest, like I said, this had been a very intense week. I was feeling totally tired, totally drained. And I came home, took a nap, and changed and put on one of my favorite t-shirts. Blessed is she who believed there would be a fulfillment of that which was spoken to her from the Lord, is what the t-shirt says. And it comes from a women's conference at my church back in New York, like years and years ago. And so I put it on. It's my favorite t-shirt. And I'm just walking around. And all of a sudden, Holy Spirit says to me, "Hey, honey, do you remember the word that you got that year?" And I was like, "Oh." And all of a sudden, he brought it back to mind. And I started remembering pieces. And I was like, I bet I still have it. So I dug into my journals, because I got all my journals right here. I dug into them. I found it. I read the word. The word literally talks about, it's like she's like, I saw like a storyboard for like a book or a movie. And in the first scene, like there's these weights in front of you, but you're not working out yet. You're not dressed to work out. And then you get ready, like you change your appearance so that you're ready. Then you begin to work out, like working every day until you reach your goal. And finally, you begin to train other women. So don't think small of this time of training, and don't belittle this time of training, because it's meant to be your joy. And from your place of victory, you will train others. You'll become the one they look to, because you're the one who's gone before. And she quotes Hebrews 12 in there too. And I read it and I just started to cry, because at the time that I got that word, I didn't really know what it meant. Like, I thought it meant like training up other women, or, being an example for them. And that's something that I do in my life anyway, and that God has used me to be an encouragement to other women. But I was crying yesterday reading this word, because I'm literally living it out, specifically training women in fitness. And so here is what I thought was this random opportunity that God just dropped in my lap. And it was a fulfillment of the word that God gave me 5 years ago. Now, here's the part that really gets me. Whew. As I was processing with him, and I was like, "Lord, I totally forgot about that." And he said, "I know, honey, and I didn't. Even when you forget, I never do. And I care about all the details." And I just want to share this testimony, because I think so many times, especially when it comes to dating, when it comes to dreams of our hearts, when it comes to these things that are precious to us, it's easy to feel like, God, is this still happening? Like, is this with the things that are like on the forefront of our minds, which, to be honest, this wasn't for me. Like, I've always loved to work out, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to be like, that wasn't an aspiration of mine, but here I am. And so, when it comes to these words that he's spoken to our hearts, when it comes to these things that he's promised us, even when you've forgotten, even when it feels like it was years ago. Again, this word I found out was 5 years ago. Even when we forget, even when we think it's on a shelf, God doesn't forget, and he cares about all the details. And that is just as true for the details of our hearts and dating as it is for any other area of our lives.
Oh man. So the call to action is, as we're being patient on this journey, in the pause, we can go back and reflect on some of the promises that the Lord gave us, whether it was something that we wrote in our journal, a prophetic word that maybe we have recorded. I'm kind of like that guy, who just will straight up pull up his phone. Like, what?
Oh, that's me too. That's me too. Yeah. This one happened to be written out, but believe me, I got plenty on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's good. That really moved my heart, because I was like, dang, I haven't revisited some of these. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be very encouraging on the,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Not one word falls to the ground void, but prospers in the thing for which he sent it. And delay does not mean denial. And so when it feels like things are still, I was sharing this before we hopped on, Mickler, but as we were talking about what was on our hearts today, the Lord brought Psalm 23 to mind. He leads me beside the still waters. What makes waters peaceful? is that there's not movement. And sometimes in our lives, when there's not movement, we're like, what's happening? When maybe he just wants to lead us beside the still waters for a while. Maybe it's time for you to focus on your business. Maybe it's time for me to focus on training. Maybe it's a chance to catch our breath, because again, when it's comes to dating, again, like the excitement, oh my gosh, this is happening. And then either like, oh, that didn't work out, or it just got quiet, or what's going on? Like, if it was all excitement all the time, that would honestly be exhausting. It's true in life anyway. Like, everybody needs a chill night. So, what if God is just giving you a chill time in dating? And then what do? Like, do you sulk and you're like, oh my gosh, this is quiet, nothing's happening, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, guess I'll eat some worms? No. Or do you process those real emotions with the Lord, revisit the things that He has said to you in the past? And I think the other piece that I would add to what you said, Mickler, is to steward well what's in front of you. Maybe that's a business, maybe that's a job, maybe that's a friendship, maybe that's kids, maybe that's a situation, maybe that's a community, maybe that's something that He's put in your heart to pursue. Steward well what is in front of you in this season, and trust Him with a pause. And know that it's not forever.
No, that's huge. And I think like stewarding like what's in front of you, I think for a lot of us guys, like it could be us, like the thing that we're
Ooh.
stewarding.
Ooh, talk to that. That's
Oh,
good.
we're gonna go there. Okay.
Let's go.
All right. So, dang, don't quote me on this, but I think it's in Ephesians where it talks about husbands loving your wife like your body, your own body.
Mm-hmm.
Like you steward it and you love your body. So that's how you would treat your wife, you know? But okay, being a fitness coach, like what I've come to understand is like I hated myself and I hated my body. So I treated it a certain way. I turned to not being active. I turned to overeating all the time because I was coping with my feelings. And it was like, dang, I need to do something about this. So, like, how do we expect to be that man who loves his wife if we don't even love ourselves right now? So, like, what if in this season, in this time, like the Lord is calling you as to go from being a boy to becoming a man? And it's
Boom.
like, hey, maybe some of us need to learn responsibility, like whether it's our finances or our body or the people in our lives. You know, it's like, um, oh my gosh, Yamris was
Yeah.
talking about it.
Money. Yeah.
How what drew her, you know, to her now husband was like he was a gentleman, not only to her, but he was a gentleman to everybody, you know?
Yeah.
So like what if right now it's like, hey, the Lord is trying to show us like how do we love the person in front of us, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a stranger, maybe it's a person at Bible study, whoever, like how can we love and serve them? Like what if the Lord is teaching us something in regards to our relationships that we're trying to steward right now? Even though our dating is currently on a pause, maybe we're not getting the matches, we're not getting the hits, we're not talking to any girls right now. But what if the Lord is doing something right now where I'm trying to serve my fellow brother, you know?
100%.
Because as I learn to lay down my life, then, you know, that will translate when I'm actually married, you know?
Absolutely. And I'm going to flip it on the ladies. So
Oh,
you were talking about, like, husbands love your wives as you love your own bodies and stewarding your own bodies. I would add for women, because we are such emotional beings, I think the thing that we have to remember, that I'm being reminded of as well, is that my emotions are not a man's responsibility. They're not anybody else's responsibility but my own. And so if you're in a pause, or you're not feeling pursued, or you're not feeling loved, or you're not feeling like, first of all, okay, so how can you intentionally like seek that out with the Lord, right? And process what's going on in your own heart. But then also, you can buy yourself flowers, like you can buy yourself flowers. What are you doing with your heart in this season? Like, because I believe that as women, part of what we get to do and part of how we reflect the heart of the Father to the men that God gives us is to be a safe place, is to be a place of rest and a haven. And so, what does it look like for me to cultivate that in my own heart right now? Whether that's going for a hike, whether that's sitting by the lake with the Lord in my peaceful spot, whether it's buying a bottle of wine, which I will be honest, I did today because sometimes I just need that in my life, you know, whether it is like I'm gonna get the good chocolate, or I'm gonna treat myself to a pedicure, or I'm gonna go out with girlfriends and go to coffee, or I'm gonna shut my phone off for an entire day and just sit and read this book I've been wanting to read, or whatever. Like, my emotions are not a man's responsibility. And so, how can I steward my emotions? Like Mickler's talking about stewarding his body. And by the way, ladies, we got a part to do in stewarding our bodies as well. At the same time, how can I steward my emotions in a way that when the man does come, whether back around or comes into my life to begin with, I am an invitation to rest. I am an invitation to beauty. I am an invitation. I am a haven that invites him, right? Not in terms of like some kind of weird way. Like, don't hear what I'm not saying, but I don't need you to fulfill my emotional needs, right? Like, I am already, God and I have this covered, and I'm taking care of myself. And yes, I will get emotionally, like, I will I will experience emotions with you. At the same time, I'm not looking for you to fulfill those for me, right? I'm already taking care of myself. I'm already taking care of my body. I'm already taking care of my emotions. I've already built a lifestyle of rest and self care. I know last week that we talked about, it's not just all about me when it comes to dating, and that marriage is selfless. And that's true. And I just want to touch on something that we kind of said that I want to say again. Like, at the same time, we pour from a full cup, not an empty one. So if I'm in this place of emptiness and then this guy comes along, then I'm going to be looking for him to fill my cup. And that's not healthy for either person. But if my cup is already full, if my cup is overflowing, I'm just reminded of the story of like Rebecca and the camels, right? Of like, hey, like, I'll water your camels also. Like, I have more than enough here. So let me give you a drink and let me water your camels also. So let me, out of this overflow, let me be a blessing to you. Let me, again, it's not a matter of needing him to meet my needs, but I'm already in this place where I have taken care of myself. I have taken care of my emotional needs. I have emotionally regulated, like, let's just be honest, all these things. I already have rest and refreshing and joy in my life. So I'm not dependent on you to give that to me. So when you come along, I'm not going to suck it out of you like a leash, leech, but out of the overflow of what I've already cultivated in my life, I can give you to drink. What would you say to that, Mickler? And I think, I was going to say, I think that's especially important to remember when things are quiet, because that's when it can feel like nobody likes me, everybody hates me, guess I'll eat some worms, and like, we have a choice of how we steward, because the quiet is a season as well. It's not forever. I mean, we both know that when it comes to dating, like, we could both pick up our phones and it's a totally different story by the time we get off this podcast episode, right? Like, it's just true. It's just life. So for whatever season the quiet is, how am I stewarding the quiet, and how am I stewarding my heart in the quiet?
Yeah, no, okay. So that's the big gist of it. Like, when we are in the pause, to remain patient, like, we are embracing the stillness and the rest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what that looks like is, hey, maybe we need to learn to embrace our emotions, learn to regulate them. And as you mentioned, like, release it after we've kind of been real and raw with the Lord and with ourselves. The second thing is like, hey, remember God's promises for you. Like, we have a bunch. Like, maybe we forgot it, but God never did. So we can go back to those. And then lastly, like, steward the thing that's right in front of us right now, whether it's like building a business, developing different relationships, or even yourself in this time and season.
Yeah, and stewarding yourself, because there's stewarding what's in your hand, and then there's stewarding yourself, and those are not the same. I mean, they're connected, but I think that's the fourth point that I would add, is stewarding your own heart, as you were talking about, Mickler, like stewarding your body, like, love your wife as you love your body, right? Like, stewarding your body. And for us women, like, stewarding our emotions. That's, I'm not looking for a man to fulfill those for me, but I'm already stewarding my emotions and stewarding my heart with the Lord and taking care of myself and filling myself with joy and nice things, not nice things, but things that bring joy and refreshing. I guess that's the word I'm looking for, refreshing, so that I can be an invitation and a haven, an invitation to rest.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I think this is huge too. Also, to like, I'm like now I'm adding a fifth. It's like
Go
having
for it.
having like a community of people to also
Yeah.
be raw and real with people. Like, or with your emotions and
Mhm.
um,
Even if it's just one or two, you don't have to be raw and real with 25 people.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, 100%.
Jesus wasn't. He had an inner circle. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, he had the 3 and then the 12.
Hmm?
No, and I think it's also very important too, because just to do that, like maybe sometimes if we stay in that pity party, like we don't go reach out to someone and saying like, "Hey, I need help."
That is why I am super grateful for people like all of my best friends do this for me. Like I was picturing faces. I was like, oh yeah, she does it, and she does it. Yeah. Of like, they'll let me be real and process, and they're like, all right,
Yeah.
now what are you gonna do about it? Yeah, like,
That's
okay,
great.
you had it out. What are you gonna do about it? We all
No,
need that.
wow, that's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that that's what women do too, because I feel like,
Mhm.
men tend to be like the solution focused, like, hey, this is what needs to get done. And I don't know, I've heard things where it's like, sometimes when the woman's opening up, like she doesn't want the solution, she wants to be
Oh,
heard.
totally. Which is
Yeah,
why we let each other cry it out first, say it all first. But when I am Marcoing them for the third time about the same thing, they're like, okay, Rach,
yeah.
we processed through this. We've done the virtual hug or the in-person hug. We've done the tears. I got it. All right. Now, first of all, remember who you are.
Mhm.
Secondly, what are you going to do about it? Because you're not going to stay stuck.
Yeah, that's good. I love to hear that. I love to hear that because I
I'm
was
blessed with
unsure.
some I'm blessed with some pretty amazing friends in my life that I don't take lightly.
Amen. Yeah, I think that's so so huge and important.
It is.
Yeah, because guys, I think guys are afraid, to say
Hmm.
like I need help because it comes across as like we're weak. But
Mm. That's a whole other episode.
that is a whole other episode. Yeah, definitely don't want
That
to go
sounds
into
like something for your personal Instagram and YouTube content
that.
for the guys. I'm just gonna throw that out.
Yeah. All right, adding it to my list to
Yeah,
do.
you should add that to your content list.
Cool. I think that's everything.
I think
We'll land
so. I
it.
think we can land this plane.
All right. Well, land it.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Mickler and I do not take lightly for a moment that you tune in to this show. And, that's why we're here. We're showing up and being raw, real, and vulnerable about every step of our journey, right? The things we're learning in the process, how we're learning to honor God, how we're learning to honor others, what we're learning about ourselves. And it means a lot to us that you tune in. And so if you have found value in today's episode, we would ask that you would give it a like and subscribe, and most of all, share it with somebody you know who would benefit from this conversation that we had today. And then give us your feedback. What kind of things would you like us to talk about on this show? We're going to keep being raw, real, and vulnerable and showing up with our journey. And if there's something that you specifically would like us to dig into, we'd love to do that for you. So, again, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode.
All right.
Peace.
Later, y'all.